Hi everyone, it's Lou Collins. Today I want to talk to you about choosing the correct inks for your stamping. There is a plethora of different inks on the market. So you've got things like embossing ink, solvent ink, pigment ink, dye inks and hybrid inks. And how do we know as beginner crafters which one to pick up for which techniques? I'm going to be talking today about basic stamping. So maybe some words or maybe some small images, and I'm going to be showing you which ones I would personally recommend. For embossing ink, this Versamark is a very popular brand, but this is a clear ink. Mine's quite a dirty pad now, but a clear ink that is very sticky. This is going to stay wet for a long time, and that then allows time for your embossing powder to stick to the ink and for you to heat set it. So embossing ink I would only ever be using if I'm using it with embossing powder. You will find embossing ink in lots of other brands as well, so just take a look at the description. Now for a solvent ink, StazOn is probably one of the most popular brands and it comes in lots of different colours. Now a StazOn is going to stick to any material. So this may be acetate, plastic, metal, wood, whatever you're stamping on, it will dry, it will air dry onto virtually any surface. Now when we're looking at any other type of ink pads, it's ideal if you can learn the difference between a dye ink and a pigment ink, because most ink pads will fall under one of these two categories and it will affect the way they react on the paper when stamping. You can also get a hybrid ink, which is a mixture of the two. So a dye ink is something like your distress ink. This is almost a watery ink, I would say. The colour is immersed in the ink and it will flow down into your paper. It does create fairly vivid colours and you can get it in absolutely any colour you like. This one from Memento is also a dye ink. These are quite good for stamping with, but because they are a dye and they soak into your paper, you're not going to be able to use these with embossing powders, but you will get quite a clear image. Now a pigment ink is different to a dye ink, and this is also a bit like a pigment. It's a bit of a hybrid, the distress oxides, which are also very popular. A pigment ink the colour will sit on top of the paper. It will not soak in. If you imagine the colour is floating around in particles and it can't seep into the paper. This does also mean though, because the colour is sitting on top of the paper, it stays wet a little bit longer and it will stay wet usually long enough to hold your embossing powders. With pigment inks, you're also going to get quite a nice clear image when stamping detail. Now, one of the issues that I find with using a dye ink is that when it's on the stamp, it can pool a little onto the stamp and you can get a blotchy finish, particularly if you are stamping quite a solid image. This is why I tend to reach for my pigment inks for stamping larger areas. You also need to look at how these ink pads are going to react with water, because in the distress range they are known to be water reactive. So you can stamp and get beautiful impressions, but if your project then comes into contact with any moisture, so you may spray a background, you may flick some water on it, you're going to find your ink is going to run and bleed. So look at the back of your ink pads. I would definitely recommend for detail on your projects VersaFine Clair or Memento, particularly if you just want a black, but these do all come in lots of different colours. So we're going to be able to use this with any wet mediums afterwards, and you know you're not going to get any bleeding. So with all of this in mind, if you're a complete beginner looking for which ink pads to stock up on first, particularly if you're looking at doing some detail stamping for, say, sentiments, I would recommend VersaFine Clair or Memento to begin with. I hope this brief explanation of ink pads has helped you. Let us know in the comments if you have any further questions, and don't forget, of course, to check out the rest of the 3-minute card making hacks playlist on our channel just here.